colleagues, and welcome to today's webinar on navigating uncertainty, how HRM Dynamic Capabilities contribute to organisational wellbeing and performance. My name is Colin Lindsay. I'm a researcher and professor here at Strathclyde Business School, and I'm the director of the ESRC PrOPEL Hub. This event is co-hosted by the ESRC PrOPEL Hub. The first question is always, what does PrOPEL mean? PrOPEL stands for Productivity Outcomes of Workplace Practice, Engagement and Learning. And the PrOPEL Hub is a major ESRC initiative that brings together 9 universities, the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, and a range of employers and other stakeholders to examine how we can learn about best practice in workplace practices and people management and how that might contribute to employee well-being and innovation performance. You can find more information about our work and future events on our website, and we'll paste that into the chat function. This event is also co-hosted by the ESRC Interact project. Interact is a Made Smarter Innovation ESRC network funded to the tune of £4 million, which brings together a range of universities, digital technology providers, and UK manufacturers to explore the human issues at the heart of the diffusion of new technology in manufacturing. Again, if you want to know more about our work and the work that my team is taking forward around dynamic capabilities and people management in the manufacturing sector, please contact us through our web resources that you'll find in the chat function. One of the core activities of both the PrOPEL Hub and the Interact network is to bring together world-leading researchers to share their insights on issues around workplace organisation, people management, and how we can drive better organisational well-being and performance. And it's a privilege to welcome today's keynotes, Dr. Paula Apascaritei and Professor Marta Elvira. Both colleagues are from the IESE Business School in Madrid, and they have substantial expertise in human capital development, organisational studies, and impacts on employee well-being and performance. And Paula and Marta have chosen today to address us on HRM Dynamic Capabilities, organisational well-being and performance. And why? Well, I guess the COVID-19 crisis and its impacts have required businesses to demonstrate dynamism in transforming their business models, in developing new product and service offers, and in rethinking how they organise work and the workplace. And in that context, many businesses and researchers have turned back to the already very influential Dynamic Capabilities framework. Dynamic capabilities tend to be defined as the capacity of organisations to sense opportunities and dangers, to seize opportunities and drive innovation and performance, and to reconfigure both tangible and intangible assets to transform the organisation and its performance. But what's the role of HRM in this story? And is there such a thing as HRM dynamic capabilities? And if so, how do they impact on employee performance and well-being? Well, that's what Paula and Marta have chosen to speak to us about today and to share the insights from their important research. Paula, Marta, it's a tremendous pleasure to welcome you to our webinar series. And Paula, the floor is yours. Please provide your presentation.
Thank you very much for having us today, and thank you for being here for our talk. We look forward to talking to you about the dynamic capabilities, what else for HRM. So let us get started, and I'll jump right in and talk to you about the Great Resignation. I'm sure that we've all heard about it recently, and it even has a Wikipedia article on it, and they defined it as the Big Quit or the Great Reshuffle, an ongoing trend where people leave their jobs because they choose to do so. And this topic has made headlines. Actually, the Pew Research Center is worried about it and has experts analyze it. Also, the World Economic Forum asks what it is and when did it actually start. And Harvard Business Review says that it didn't actually start just in 2021. And they also wonder whether the Great Resignation is actually the correct name for it or not. Well, whatever the great resignation is, it is quite clear that people are leaving their jobs and that it is a topic that worries HR managers and HR technicians. What the academic literature has told us so far is that if we have good HR systems, and valuable human capital, we're all set. Then the company will also go well, and there will also be a profit. But if this is all there is to it, only the high quality human capital and a good HRM system, then why are we so worried about people leaving their jobs? Because surely we can attract new talent, we can train it in time. Yes, it will take some time and some money, but it is not impossible to do. Well, we think that there is a missing part to this equation, to this model that is on screen. And this part, we think that it is capabilities. So it is not only about the HR system and the human capital, but there is this missing link that they can do together. What do these two elements actually build? So in this talk, as you know, we are going to try to explain this. We're going to try to explain what HRM dynamic capabilities are and how they actually work. Now, one of the first problems we have is that capabilities themselves are difficult to define. As you can see from this paper, that is a review paper done by Schilke and colleagues in 2018, they offer at least 7 different definitions. So you can see that there is a lot of talk about this. Now, researchers have divided capabilities into zero-order capabilities or ordinary capabilities, which are very similar to practices. And they permit the firm to make a living in the short term, so in the present. They permit the firm to function well. And they also talk about dynamic capabilities, that's something else that help firms thrive in the long term and adapt when the environment around them also changes. Our working definition of dynamic capabilities for today will be that of Thies and colleagues. They say that dynamic capabilities are the firm's ability to integrate, build, and reconfigure internal and external competencies to address rapidly changing environments. So this is what we're going to work with, because as you surely know, Thies is one of the main proponents of this theory framework. Okay, we have seen the definition. Let's move on to some practical examples. So in the case of Walmart, one dynamic capability that they totally stand out at is that they can effectively operate large, low-cost supermarkets throughout the US. However, once they leave their home market, it is more difficult to replicate it in Germany. And for Google, one of their dynamic capabilities is asset orchestration, where valuable resources are brought in through acqui-hiring, along with traditional technology acquisitions. So acqui-hiring is basically when larger, usually tech companies, acquire smaller companies that have a product that they like and that have human capital that they would like to integrate inside their company. And so in this way, by hiring a company with the product and the people that created the product, they transfer both the human capital and the tacit knowledge. So let us watch a very short video just to refresh everything that we've seen in the past minutes and see how Thies explains what dynamic capabilities are in an article in the California Management Review. Okay.
Deep uncertainty is ubiquitous in economies experiencing rapid technological change. Maintaining organizational agility is critical. Since achieving agility often involves sacrificing efficiency, knowing how much agility is needed and at what cost is a crucial challenge for managers. Organizations with superior dynamic capabilities know how and when they can make the critical trade-offs between responding to change and maintaining efficiency. Risk is associated with known outcomes, where the probability is well calibrated. Uncertainty is about unknown unknowns. Managing risk has very different requirements from managing uncertainty. A useful analogy is chess versus mixed martial arts. In chess, almost every move is knowable. The better player almost always wins. There are a large but finite number of moves and counter-moves, so playing chess has elements of managing risks, but managing uncertainty is more like mixed martial arts. MMA allows for the use of a broader repertoire of techniques. Chess takes place in a closed world, where the rules are fixed and the nature of the solution is fixed. MMA is more open. Participants cross-train in a variety of styles to counter their opponent's strength and remain effective in all phases of combat. Dominance requires having your mind, body, emotions, and breath competitively connected and calm, waiting without anticipation for whatever might happen. Upsets are common in MMA. The lack of predictability and deep uncertainty for the combatants in MMA is not unlike today's global innovation economy, where existing rules are being changed and entirely new rules are being invented. When confronting such circumstances, entrepreneurial managers are needed to redeploy not only financial capital, but also technical expertise, while balancing stakeholder interests both within and beyond the organization. A firm's dynamic capabilities govern how it integrates, builds, and reconfigures internal and external competences to address changing business environments. Strong dynamic capabilities allow a company to roll with the punches and tap into new opportunities. To learn more, please read Dynamic Capabilities and Organizational Agility, Risk, Uncertainty, and Strategy in the Innovation Economy by David Teese, Margaret Pederoff, and Sophie Lee, in California Management Review, Volume 58, Issue Number 4.
So I think the point about comparing chess and MMA to our current context really drove the point home, because we really want to see how dynamic capabilities for HR, how they can help the firms roll with the punches that they inevitably get. So now let us really integrate these topics that we have seen before. Let us integrate and move dynamic capabilities inside of our equation. If you'd like to see a slightly more boring version of this graph, it is this. This is the graph that we have in our paper in order to explain what we want to talk about today. And as we have talked before, we propose that HRM resources, that is human capital, and HRM systems enable firms to develop HRM dynamic capabilities. These capabilities, in the center of the figure, there are 3 types: for building, integrating, and reconfiguring. And they serve the firm because they foster change and adaptability, well-being, and performance. Now let's dive into these 3 types of HRM dynamic capabilities. Please bear with me for these next slides, as they're a bit more elaborate, but we will get through them very well. Our purpose here is not to present the entire academic paper, but rather to present examples that may drive the point home and to show you a couple of practical cases that other researchers have also studied about HRM dynamic capabilities. First of all, knowledge building capabilities. What does a firm need in order to build knowledge building capabilities? In terms of human capital, we need dynamic managerial capabilities, which are all the soft qualities of leaders, from their personality traits to their core self-evaluations and values. Teese, in his 2011 book, mentions the entrepreneurial manager that doesn't just control employees, but organizes and reorganizes assets and finds new opportunities. This type of asset orchestration is a key capability for building knowledge. Moreover, entrepreneurial managers know that a diverse and motivated workforce can apply accumulated knowledge to advance innovation in the presence of a supporting framework. In a similar study in China, in an automotive setting, in the automotive sector, Zhao and Chadwick found that indeed workers need both the motivation and the opportunity to excel in new project development. The idea is quite simple, really. We need both talented employees and their willingness to innovate, and entrepreneurial managers understand this. On top of dynamic managerial capabilities, human capital diversity is another way in which firms can build capabilities. Robertson et al. Explain how diversity brings unique capabilities too. For example, via languages that people know, their culture, and other aspects that these entail, such as the identification of unique international opportunities. They call such diversity surface level when it refers to race, age, or gender, and they call it deep level when it refers to education, culture, and background. Diversity, both surface level and deep, can build capabilities. As we can also see in the figure, such capabilities can be for R&D, for knowledge management, or for other parts of the company. And such capabilities are also related to different types of performance indicators. Moving on, social integration capabilities are of two kinds. They are those that are internal to the firm and those that are external, facing others. In terms of internal capabilities, Schenkel and Thailand explain how there are key roles in the social structure of an organization, which should be taken into account when downsizing, for example. These roles are, for example, gatekeepers, connectors, brokers, and core members. Being aware of the roles that people hold within the social fabric of the firm can limit the dynamic capability loss when downsizing. Another example from previous research of social integration capability is network responsiveness, which is defined as the speed at which the social fabric of the firm adapts to strategic change. Moving on to the social integration capabilities that are external, facing others, we refer the study of Lin et al. In two samples of companies from China and Hungary. Lin and colleagues find that customer-oriented strategy, together with a supportive HRM system, actually bring about the customer linking capability. And this customer linking capability is defined by them as a firm's capability in creating and maintaining close customer relationships. For the next part, we move on to the reconfiguration enhancing capabilities. So for reconfiguration enhancing capabilities, they are very important to manage ambidexterity. And ambidexterity is a simultaneous pursuit of both exploration and exploitation, where exploitation refers to pursuing the status quo of the company, while exploration refers to looking for new opportunities outside of the company. And Apascaritei et al., in their study of a Scandinavian high-tech company, this is a case study, they define this dynamic capability of managing ambidexterity as the ability of organizations to create and recombine their resources in novel ways in order to manage tensions between efficiency and flexibility, or stability and change. Let me move on. So now that we know what managing ambidexterity is, Apascaritei et al. Also mentioned that they also mentioned that this is not an easy task, that many times innovation comes with tensions and comes with conflicts. It comes also with managing paradox. So what they propose is actually that there are different types to manage these paradoxes. There is conflicting separation, complementary integration, and interrelated separation. Related to this, Smith and Lewis, in a different paper, they talk about how sometimes, in order to manage paradox, it is better to use either temporal or geographical separation in order to loosen the tensions. What is very important when managing ambidexterity and paradox is to cultivate also HR flexibility. That is, to have employees willing to adapt and take on flexible behaviors, as well as the ability to efficiently and effectively coordinate them. In a related paper that we are working on right now, we study HR flexibility and find that it is best combined with high commitment HR systems for staff, but not as much for managers. We study a sample of Spanish companies And we asked what types of HR practices they use for staff and managers separately. And initially, we thought that that the HR system for managers would bring about more HR flexibility. But what we find was that actually the HR system for staff is much more important in order to cultivate the firm level capability of HR flexibility. So in this sense, both managing them with dexterity and HR flexibility bring about resource fluidity, what those at all call resource fluidity. This is the ability of firms to actually adapt and be agile. So let us watch another video that is also short and that also summarizes what we have seen so far. This video is very useful because it goes also outside the strict HR area to show how dynamic capabilities can be applied also to other parts of the organization.
Today's rapidly changing world can be difficult for companies. They need to meet the expectations of their customers, develop a strong brand identity, and be able to adapt quickly to radical shifts within their industries, addressing new demands that are hard to anticipate. The need for a company to meet all of these goals simultaneously has led them to develop dynamic capabilities. First proposed by David Teese, Gary Pisano, and Amy Schuin, this organizational concept emphasizes the capability to integrate, build, and reconfigure internal and external competences to address rapidly changing environments. Because every organization is different, there is no general set of rules for an organization to build dynamic capabilities, particularly in today's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous business environments, or VUCA. This creates an acute challenge for management in the areas of innovation, organizational structure, and managing talent, just to name a few. According to California Management Review's Fall 2018 article, Innovation, Dynamic Capabilities, and Leadership, 3 main dynamic capabilities are becoming necessary to achieve corporate agility in the VUCA world: sensing and shaping opportunities and threats that may come along, seizing opportunities, and maintaining competitiveness through enhancing, reworking, and/or protecting one's assets. For example, Steve Jobs and Apple sensed where the consumer technology industry was headed in the mid-2000s. As a result, Apple evolved their innovation roadmap, and the iPhone became the godfather of the smartphone era. When developing the iPod several years later, Apple solidified their competitive advantage by cutting deals directly with studios and recording companies. This resulted in iTunes, a complementary ecosystem where customers could place all of their media in a single user-friendly platform. Apple shaped its own dominance through keen foresight, distinctive design, highly customized global supply chains, and strong patents. The classic concept behind dynamic capabilities stresses 3 main strategic stages. The first stage, learning, requires a company to build common codes of communication and reorganize routines or patterns of interactions to create efficient solutions. Better interactions can also make better use of alliance and acquisition routines that enable organizations to bring new strategic assets from external sources. This leads to the second stage, new assets, where the organization integrates new strategic assets into company processes. These assets can include new capabilities, technologies, and perspectives from customer feedback. Performance is driven by more routines for gathering and processing information, for linking customer experiences to design choices, and for coordinating factories and component suppliers. The third and final stage, transformation of existing assets, reconfigures asset structures and accomplishes rapid transformation in the face of fast-changing markets. Organizations must develop low-cost, high-payoff changes that result in reconfiguration and transformation ahead of the competition. Over time, assets can become more valuable in combination than separately, such as when physical assets, human capital, and intellectual properties create a synergy of complementary assets. This is called co-specialization, which gives an organization a sustainable competitive advantage over the competition. And it's this confluence of dynamic capabilities that produces lasting competitive advantage, allowing firms to grow and maintain success for the next 10 years, 100 years, and beyond. To read more on how dynamic capabilities help navigate organizations in VUCA environments, please visit cmr.berkeley.edu to read the Fall 2018 issue on management innovation in an uncertain world.
So as you can see, dynamic capabilities have been studied in multiple areas of the firm, but human capital has always been just a small part of this, not a centerpiece. But what we believe is that actually the role of HRM for dynamic capabilities is much stronger. And in the next couple of slides, we want to quickly present what exactly it is that HRM can do in order to contribute to building dynamic capabilities. So of course, HRM has to do the typical HR functions, which are selective and strategic hiring, ensuring training, development, and ensuring that the incentives are designed correctly and that communication with employees is optimal. But on top of that, HR should also manage the potentially negative effects of incentives, pay, and autonomy. This is particularly important as a study by Gertzi et al. On companies in Germany has shown that some pay for performance related practices and some autonomy practices actually can decrease the worker's health, yet increase psychological or relational dimensions of well-being. So therefore, the role of HRM is to balance out what are the positive effects and the negative effects of HR practices. Another challenge is to manage talent programs fairly. The problem, let's say, with talent programs is that they target particular workers in particular positions. And this could be deemed unfair by other workers. So ensuring that there is a perception of fairness and that the process is transparent and clear is very important. Next, Nishi and Wright, they talk about how it is very important to ensure that the HR system is aligned in intention, implementation, and perception. That is, to ensure that practices result in the intended outcomes, that managers correctly implement such practices, and that workers perceive those practices as designed. So in a nutshell, HRM systems should be coherent and aligned, and they should prioritize employee well-being. Now that we know about HRM dynamic capabilities and how HRM and human capital sustain them, let's move on to see what are the consequences of a firm having HRM dynamic capabilities. So in the video, it was quite clear that that dynamic capabilities allow the firm to survive and to thrive long term, and they also offer competitive advantage for firms. But on top of that, first of all, capabilities can alter resources and practices and trigger organizational change. Having both high quality employees that are entrepreneurial and knowledgeable and an HR system that empowers and listens to them is very likely going to actually change the firm itself, changing the knowledge base, changing the practices, and changing the firm assets. On top of that, we also believe that if the HR system cultivates fairness, cultivates care for workers, and helps them develop themselves and also helps them be valuable for the company, then this will also foster employee well-being. And we cannot wait to actually hear about your project related to this, which we saw is a very new project. And we want to find out more about how work engagement and workplace innovation for productivity and well-being can actually help companies develop and get better performance. Finally, cultivating and developing HRM capabilities will result in a more agile, adaptable organization that has solid knowledge, a solid social structure, and the flexibility to face changing environmental demands. This leads to survival of the firm first, and secondly to performance. We want to transmit this message about the importance of dynamic capabilities and how they affect our organizational outcomes. We do this through this three-pronged approach based on knowledge building, social integration, and reconfiguration enhancing capabilities. And these allow firms in fast-paced dynamic environments to harness the synergies between human capital and HRM and to reinforce their strategic agility. We, however, don't want to end without issuing also advice and also a word of warning. So to put it in the words of Chadwick and Flinchbaum, they observed that research on HRM dynamic capability may be a key but largely overlooked place in the HRM firm rents causal chain where persistent firm level heterogeneity resides. This has still not been studied very much, and we believe that also firms are probably not aware of this distinct role that capabilities may have. And to issue a word of warning, and to put it in the words of Verona and Zoyo, we caution that adaptation via dynamic capabilities does not necessarily generate better fit with a rapidly changing environment, since the direction of change can be wrongly perceived. So this is also the larger word of warning about applying any theoretical framework, because any framework has some boundary conditions. And any framework should be actually applied to the firm context, to the firm sector, the firm size, and so forth. So thank you very much for your attention, and we welcome your questions.
Paula, Marta, especially Paula, but also Marta, for your inputs to the research that you've just discussed. Thank you so much for a really fascinating and timely presentation about the nexus between HRM and dynamic capabilities. I'll take some questions from the Q&A function, but let me start by following up some of the issues that you have raised, Paula. First, before we talk about a bit more about dynamic capabilities, you mentioned there that this is a framework and that there are significant challenges in applying this framework, and that we need to be aware of context within the organization. Can you speak a bit more about how you have operationalized your research and done empirical work on this, and about any future plans that you have to do more empirical work, and what some of the challenges are around operationalizing what is quite a complex framework?
Definitely. So since dynamic capabilities are for HRM are a new topic, there are not very many measures available to directly measure what they could be and what their levels could be in companies. So so operationalization and measurement is definitely one of the big areas of future research, I'd say. And in other work we have tried to adapt our questions to the local Spanish context, and to find out how HR flexibility could be important for Spanish companies.
If I may, on that question, could you please go back to our general model, Paula? Because it is an excellent question, and I think is related also to Gillian's, right? Because it's not just in HR processes, but across the business, like with a system view, particularly focusing on technology. So in a separate project, which Paula has also participated in, it's a long shot because it's not completed yet, okay? But let's see if I can, with this figure, explain it. We have gathered administrative employer-employee match data set for Spain, because in this, like you said, we need system data. And the idea is to see how organizational characteristics from employers match with employee characteristics at a representative level of the workforce can help us understand, the effects of technology in job evolution. Okay, so some of our other colleagues have looked at the online market, freelance markets, etc., for skills, and looking at the evolution of technologies over time. how the skill requirements for job offers online in the Glassdoor data, right, have evolved. Now, what we would like to look at is, one thing is to have demand for technology skill in the human capital resource level, both internally. So in order to apply, say, artificial intelligence to your business model, or any advanced technology, right? You need people with the human capital able, both internally, it may require upskilling, and externally, hire external people who are highly qualified in artificial intelligence. You may not be able to upskill the required workforce. Then put in place the learning, HRM practices, training, career paths, evolution. I'll give you an example, if time allows later, of a pharmaceutical laboratory, where this implementation requires that one particular occupation disappears because it's no longer necessary face-to-face interaction, right? And so that requires staffing in job design, etc., and strong communication, right? And that allows you to build and reconfigure the kind of work that allows you to actually change and perform well. Well-being requires more management than all that. But where I'm going is that if you're going to implement in your business model kind of artificial intelligence practices, it requires a mindset change. It's not just a change of, oh, well, like transformation to date. If I change the prior kind of technologies, say, a chain in a factory, well, it would require a certain amount of time. If you failed at the end of that initial process of transformation, you have to restart, which is a long process. Not so any longer. It's a change of mindset. If you fail with a piece of software, you can actually reconfigure quite quickly. But most people will resist the change, oftentimes because we expect the old kind of transformation. So in the digital world, we need to actually be able to do this knowledge building capabilities of trial and error. Takes much quicker. It's not going to be the difficulties that we are used to in prior. And that is a much more deeper mindset change that allows you to the flexibility to reconfigure. And change can be faster, except if people are still in the mindset of how hard it was to change prior to digital. I'm not really sure I'm explaining this well, but this is one of the studies that we are trying to piece out and not yet elaborate. So it is not yet totally written.
No, you described it very well, very clearly. Can I follow up on this question? I'd like to go back to your discussion of knowledge building capabilities. And one of the things that I think in my own project that we're interested in is the tension between the TEAS approach, which is very much, and you mentioned this, is very much dependent, I would argue, on entrepreneurial managers. So there's kind of like a slightly managerialist argument that really the managers are the creative people who drive innovation in businesses, and people are an asset to be reconfigured in order to drive the business forward. Interestingly, in TEAS's work, there is sometimes, and various other dynamic capabilities work, there is sometimes a brief mention of distributed leadership, which is an interesting concept. In our own research, we're very interested in that idea that there might be a tension between entrepreneurial management and the whole idea we need senior leaders to drive innovation within businesses, but the need to distribute leadership effectively in order to capture agility and to empower employees to drive change. And in our own thinking on this, we think there's an interesting tension in the literature on this, and maybe within a lot of organizations. A couple of weeks ago, we had a cutting edge manufacturer that does distributed manufacturing across many different territories. And clearly there is a challenge around distributing leadership to those different dispersed teams, while also ensuring the coherence and the alignment that you said was so important to strategic HRM in this space. I'm sorry, that's a very rambling statement or question, but do you have any thoughts on this tension between entrepreneurial management and distributing and empowering leadership, or am I talking nonsense, which is also possible?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. That's actually a very, very good comment, because it shows why there is a space for actually developing HR within this framework, because there is actually very little about leadership and about distributed leadership. To my knowledge, at least as far as last year was concerned, there was basically nothing relating these two concepts. So I think that that is a great avenue for further research, and one that is very useful right now, that is very relevant right now for companies.
I actually think it can help us with the other paper, because we were a little bit puzzled that managers were not as important, as most of the literature led us to hypothesize. And if we think of how those practices across the board help entrepreneurial spirit to be more distributed and lead change, it might be a good explanation for our other paper. So thank you, very helpful.
Thank you for that. And maybe I can ask some other questions to learn about my own project. I think another interesting issue that you raised was the whole idea of the development of customer linking capabilities. And to what extent do you think this is a challenge across different sectors? As I mentioned, our own research in this space operates in the manufacturing sector. So clearly a tension for manufacturers is that there's a great belief in the need to servitize the manufacturing offer, to build a service offer alongside the manufactured product. And there's a great interest in some of the companies that we will be working with in co-producing and building a product around the customer. So there's again, there's an interesting tension here, because manufacturers, I think, would say, Marta and Paula are absolutely right. We need to develop these customer linking capabilities. But of course, manufacturers also operate in an environment where standard operating procedures are really important, and where delivering the product efficiently rather than necessarily engaging and networking with the broader customer base or ecosystem has been how manufacturers operate. And I don't know if in your empirical work you've sensed that tension, that this is definitely a very important capability, increasingly being increasingly customer focused and responsive to the customer, and building an offer around the customer as part of a network. But there are a lot of businesses that have not been set up like that. Sorry, again, that's not a very good question. It's more just like a statement.
So definitely, we do believe that actually capabilities should be adapted to each firm context, and for certain, the service sector and the manufacturing sector are very different, and the way that they will go about building these customer linking capabilities will also be different, because customers also expect different things. I mean, it's very different to have a person going to buy a service and to actually have another company go and have something manufactured for them. So so this is the part where we didn't go too much into depth, because of course it's a different project. That's that's a different project altogether. But yes, there are tensions, and we do believe that there is a role for HRM there too.
And if I may, in our own business, I don't know whether it happens to you in the university, but for us as a business school, so a good number of our programs might be standardized, but many others are custom design, right? And it has become more and more common for us. We don't offer, we co-design if you just take the educational sector, right? We co-designed the program much more closely with the partners than may have been the case a few years. It turns out to also have more longevity because we continue with that same partnership, and our approach as a business school at IESE is long-term added value partnerships. And for us, even though it takes a lot more investment at the beginning, it's more efficient in the long run. It may be also a long shot answer, but with all the stakeholder capitalism affecting strategy, I think it is more and more common, and I'm not as familiar again with manufacturing, but I do think it's more common to include the clients, right, and diverse stakeholders, the community. So if I think of the companies I've worked for recently in the pharma sector, to have, for example, partnership with the patient associations, so that they contribute their knowledge. So it may be external resources in that regard, right? But it helps the researchers and in the drug development to have the participant, not just to develop the new idea. And a different sector altogether, but just this morning I'm writing a case about an old winery, just to add a little bit of spice today. And it's a winery that the property goes back to the 1500. Although I like these historic cases now. And before, the enologist, the technical sort of component of the winery, would develop new wines because they like those new wines, right? But now they have to go along with what are the customers saying. So a new wine they have designed by collaborating the sales and technical arenas within the company is much more addressing the Instagrammer, literally. That is the new audience. People like to buy wines. They may not be as particular about the tannins in the wine, which is very important for the techies, but incorporating, that new online customer and their taste has turned out to help innovation as well for the organization and build that it has taken reconfiguration of how they make that wine, but just an idea. I don't know if this makes sense or not, but from the sublime to the banal.
Very, very good, thank you. We have time for just one or two more questions. So I'm going to ask Francis's question. Francis notes that from his own work that the pandemic has had a big impact on the female workforce. I guess this relates to the diversity issues that you have raised. Women during the pandemic have had to absorb much more care work in the domestic sphere, and that has impacted on employment dropout from global supply chain workers. Has this influenced your own work, and how does your work around diversity as a route to dynamic capabilities rub up against this apparent increasing inequality that has been delivered by the pandemic?
So thank you for that question. Most of our work was done before the pandemic happened, so it wasn't something that we took into account back then, but yes, definitely now, and seeing how things have changed during the last two years, it is something that could also be taken into account, and probably job design and hybrid work should also be included, which are themes that before we maybe didn't think that they were as important, but now we can see that they're clearly the thing today. So we don't maybe have particular insights also from previous literature. Again, this wasn't really a topic back then, although inequality has been, of course, studied for many years, and Marta actually has a lot of papers studying inequality, and especially focused on gender and also focused on care. So I think I'll let her add something more meaningful to this answer.
We're going to have to stop. I think the last comment in the Q&A talks about some of the research that we're doing, which is around the whole idea that very often digital investments or lots of other investments in the workplace forget about the human component. Only afterwards is HRM brought into the equation. And I think that's why your work, Paula and Marta, is so valuable, because it really helps us connect people and HRM with a dominant area of literature and theory around dynamic capabilities. I want to thank both Paula and Marta for a really fantastic presentation and a really enjoyable discussion. As I have said before, I think we're going to release a little poll right now just to gather some feedback on today's session and how we can improve sessions in the future. Please complete that poll. You will find information about future PrOPEL Hub and Interact events on our websites. Please visit those websites, which you will find in the chat function. Okay, that's the end of my housekeeping. Thank you again, Marta and Paula, for a fascinating presentation, and we look forward to your research going forward.